Today on Story Essence, we will take a comparative, macro look at the movies The Matrix and Drive. Don't blink or you might miss something. Let's begin. The opening hook is a way of grabbing the audience's attention and quickly filling them in on key details of your story. What is the world, and who are the good and bad teams that the protagonist ultimately will have to navigate between? The Matrix is a story about Neo joining the good team. In the opening hook, we learn there is a secret war between agents and resistance fighters. Both of those teams are looking for Neo, which then propels us into his story. Meanwhile, Drive is a story about Driver defecting from the bad team. Since he is already on a team, he is featured in the opening hook. The next section slows down a little bit to introduce us to the inner world of the protagonist. If we haven't already met them, we meet them now. At this point, we will get a sense of the status quo and the protagonist's frustration with the way things are. They may even meet a love interest or a mentor who taps into their anxieties about the status quo and provokes the protagonist to change by joining their team. In The Matrix, that takes the form of Neo being led to Trinity, the love interest, who will then lead Neo to Morpheus, the mentor. Trinity recruits Neo by relating to his discomfort with the status quo. She insists Morpheus can show Neo another way if he joins their team. In Drive, Ryan Gosling's character develops a rapport with his neighbor Irene and her young son Benicio. They introduce the idea that he might just be happier with a quiet life. Neo is late to work because of his meeting with Trinity, which leads him to getting reprimanded by his boss, who himself is a foil for the antagonist. Here, the philosophical stakes of conformity are first discussed. Neo ultimately rejects his first call to action from Morpheus, which lands him in Agent Smith's custody. Agent Smith doubles down on the philosophical stakes of cooperation and conformity as he presses Neo to help capture Morpheus. Like Morpheus and Trinity, Neo is now a victim of the bad team. Driver, sometimes mentor Shannon, makes a deal with the devil in pitching a business proposition to gangster Bernie Rose, and by extension his even more vicious associate Nino. Up until now, Driver has been shielded by Shannon from the antagonists whom he serves. Now Driver, like Neo, will be under greater scrutiny from the antagonist. He will begin to see just how bad the antagonist really is. The inciting incident ushers in a dramatic shift in the narrative, where the protagonist is implicated with the antagonist in a way that makes preserving the status quo impossible. This leads to the protagonist developing empathy for the team and their struggle. This intimate bonding phase compels the protagonist to adopt the good team's fight as their own. They are now a member of the good team. Driver, now deeply invested in his new family, begins to take the threat of working for criminals seriously. He has something to lose now. Irene's husband Standard returning from prison is yet another instance of the bad team closing in on Driver. But unlike the other antagonists, Standard and Driver have something in common: the welfare of Standard's family. Once Neo takes the red pill, there's no going back. That is his "we're not in Kansas anymore" moment. Neo finally learns the full extent of the stakes. They are caught in a war for humanity's survival against the machines, and he is somehow the chosen one. And being the chosen one means he is the only one who can lead them to victory. Standard confesses that he needs to rob a pawn shop in order to pay off an old prison debt. Otherwise, him and his family are in grave danger. For Irene and Benicio's sake, they join forces to tackle the B problem. Wait, if there is a B problem, what is the A problem of the story? Well, I'm glad you asked. The meeting of the external, internal, and philosophical stakes gives us the A story, otherwise known as the major dramatic question. This is the payoff the audience is watching the movie for. For The Matrix, that all-encompassing question might be, is Neo the one who will lead Morpheus, Trinity, and their freedom fighters to victory against the machines? For Drive, the major dramatic question is, will Driver put his life of crime behind him and end up with Irene? These A-story questions will not be solved until the B problem is first overcome. So, without further ado, the B problem. The first half of Act 2 introduces us to the B problem. This is often called the fun and games portion of the story, where the protagonist becomes better acquainted with the rules of the world and all the supporting players involved. If the protagonist is new to the world like Neo, this is also where they struggle to acquire the skills they need to thrive. If the protagonist was already on a team at the start of the movie like Driver, this is where they inform new allies what the rules of the world are, in preparation for the B problem mission. In both cases, this mission will look a lot like the events of the opening hook, but with the added benefit of context and clarified stakes. Throughout these preparations, a false ally may drop subtle hints that they are not to be trusted. However, their treachery will go undetected until the midpoint. As we approach the midpoint, we get a fuller sense of what the B problem is all about. We also learn all is not as it seems as more complications derail the otherwise straightforward mission. Now that Neo is trained, he must go back into the Matrix to meet the Oracle. The B problem mission, therefore, is get Neo in and out of the Matrix safely. Neo sees the Oracle without incident. Upon exiting the Matrix, Cypher exposes himself as a Judas-like traitor as he attempts to murder the entire team and hand Morpheus over to Agent Smith. Morpheus sacrifices himself to Agent Smith so Neo has a chance to escape the Matrix. For Drive, the B problem is simply to help Standard pull off the heist. But they aren't just robbing any pawn shop. They are duped into stealing a large sum of laundered mafia money. And to make matters worse, the guy who set up the heist and controls Standard's debt works for Nino, who is partnered with none other than Bernie Rose, aka Driver and Shannon's dangerous boss. This leads to Standard's death and puts Standard's family and Driver himself in grave danger. The B problem ends in a soul-crushing failure for the protagonist. Oftentimes, their survival is due to the mentor sacrificing themselves to the antagonist so the ill-prepared protagonist may live to fight another day. This inspires the protagonist to transition from a defensive position to an offensive one. Whereas before they were trying to avoid confrontation with the antagonist, now they are actively seeking it out. Their desire to avenge or save the mentor is a shot of adrenaline for the A-story stakes. No one believes Neo is the one quite as devoutly as Morpheus does. Losing Morpheus wounds Neo deeply, so much so, he isn't prepared to accept it. Neo assumes a leadership role in Morpheus's absence and rallies the good team to embark on a mission to rescue Morpheus. This attempt to save the mentor is the final push Neo needs to embody the lessons Morpheus taught him and engage in a direct confrontation with Agent Smith, but this time as the One. After Shannon is murdered by Bernie, Driver knows he cannot reason with Bernie and Nino. He must get his hands dirty and become the worst version of himself in order to become the best version of himself. In other words, he must kill Bernie and Nino, like the criminal he is, in order to save Irene and Benicio. It is dramatic irony at its finest. The antagonist is caught off guard by the protagonist's newfound conviction. They are surprised to see just how formidable an opponent the protagonist has become. It begins to look like the protagonist might defeat the antagonist after all. After a series of small victories, the protagonist will have the antagonist on the run, but it is a trap. The antagonist still has a few tricks left up their sleeve. In the final confrontation, the antagonist will assault the protagonist on all fronts. External, internal, and philosophical. Agent Smith gets the best of Neo in battle. He beats Neo to a pulp. Trinity is forced to watch helplessly from the ship as Neo's injuries in the Matrix manifest themselves on his real body outside of the Matrix. Agent Smith then drags Neo down onto the subway tracks to meet his maker and admonishes him as Mr. Anderson. Trinity's helplessness to save Neo attacks the internal stakes. Agent Smith, literally pinning Neo to the track, attacks the external stakes. He is about to kill Neo, and calling Neo by his given name attacks the philosophical stakes. He is effectively saying to Neo, "You are not the one who will save humanity." But Neo isn't having it. He rejects these attacks simply by saying, "My name is Neo," and throwing Agent Smith off of him in the nick of time. This is a victory for all three stakes, but not a final victory. He is still in the Matrix and still has Agent Smith to contend with. Just as an aside, it is worth noting that the scenes on Morpheus' ship, the Nebuchadnezzar, would be static and dull if not for the persistent threat of the Sentinels, the search and destroy robots that can be called on and off at the writer's whim. The threat of the Sentinels is set up fairly early in Act 2, but the payoff is expertly saved for this moment where they are reintroduced as a ticking clock for Neo. If they invade the ship before Neo gets out of the Matrix, there is a chance he will be left behind. All the stakes are instantly raised by the attacking Sentinels. We now arrive at what is commonly referred to as the all is lost moment, or the moment of despair. This is the antagonist's last laugh. The audience and the antagonist believe the protagonist has, you guessed it, lost. Agent Smith shoots Neo dead. The Sentinels have breached the ship. On the Nebuchadnezzar, Trinity mourns Neo's death. She tearfully confesses her love and belief in Neo. Thanks to Deus Ex Machina, or True Love's first kiss, Neo is resurrected as the Chosen One with full control of his powers. And like Morpheus once predicted, he is now stronger than the agents. Neo finds his way out of the Matrix just in time for the Nebuchadnezzar to blast off in a climactic hyperdrive escape from the Sentinels. Driver comes to and drives off, leaving Bernie, the blood money, and his life of crime behind him. Irene goes to Driver's door, but he never answers. Instead, he is driving into the night like a modern-day cowboy. Neo, as a fully actualized hero, lets the machines know that he intends to free humanity from their grip. So, what does it all mean? Neo succeeds externally, internally, and philosophically. He becomes the One, earns Trinity's love and respect, and defies the conformity of the Matrix. Driver succeeds externally but compromises internally and philosophically. However, the compromises he makes on the internal and philosophical stakes are not total failures. Since the internal and philosophical stakes reject the success-fail binary, it makes the ending feel a little ambiguous. Driver escapes his criminal life and protects Benicio and Irene, but he does not end up with Irene in the end. He now has his goodness, but he had to do a lot of evil things to get it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you got as much out of this as I did making it. Please let me know what your thoughts are on one or both of these films, or on screenwriting in general in the comments below. Also, keep an eye out for future videos where I discuss movies, craft, my own work, and interview inspiring storytellers of all levels of expertise on their creative journeys. Until next time, happy writing.